Anyway, so here's what we got. I got these kits from Woodcraft, and they're pretty sweet. I feel like it's a good value, and so that way we have the metal blade already, which is the harder part to do. And then I made some, I think they call these scales, the handle part. So I programmed this on the CNC machine, drew it out, and so that the machine went along and rough cut these pieces down into this block. And but here's what the finished product is that I'm going for. So this one I made for my brother, and I engraved down into it, and then I filled it with epoxy. And it has these two pegs that I glued in, these wooden pegs that I epoxied on, and then on the other side I have a deer handle or deer horns. And I'd be willing to. I did a leaf too, like a just a tree leaf. Inside this package, there's some rivets, some metal rivets that go where these wooden pegs are. And the metal rivets are really nice because you can take it on and off and all that. But the thing I didn't like about the metal rivets was the finished product. So I used the metal rivets on there while I was working on it until the very end, and then I just glued the wooden pieces in because I like this nice flush feel to this, and I didn't want to wreck that with the metal rivet feel. But anyway, what's cool about this is wood from the Sliker farm, and Brad, my father-in-law, cut all these pieces. He milled all this wood, and I thought it'd be neat to give everybody in the hunting camp a piece of the farm wood. And so I have a pile of that I'll be using for these blanks. And so that's what makes this project really cool. And some of you that have kids, I'd be happy to make blanks for you and your kids that you can, carve out together and finish this project together. It could be a night thing that you do on the evenings until you get it done together. Because there is a lot of hand. If you look right here, all these contours, I had to do a lot of that with a file, and I did use some sanders too, but did a lot of hand filing and hand carving on all this. Before I glued it down. So if you want to do this project, just let me know and I'll get you the stuff to get started. Tell me what initials you want and if you want the horns or the leaf. So I'm just going to walk you through how I made this thing now. This part I'm not going to show you how I did the programming and stuff because that would be pretty boring. But I'm going to take it from this to this. I'm going to make one more, and then you could watch this video as a reference as you make yours if you want. I mean, you might not obviously need to do the whole thing, but it'll give you some pointers anyway. All right, here we go. All right, so what I'm going to do now is remove these from this rest of this blank here. And I'm trying to take these, I want them just a little thicker than I need them to be. So the end measurement is less than 1/4 inch, but I'm gonna cut these at just under 1/4, and then I'll have some room to sand them flat. So I'm gonna use my table saw for this. I'm gonna use a push stick, and I'm not gonna stand right behind the piece. I'm gonna be pretty darn careful when I use the table saw. And this is my saw stop. This is a table saw that I wish all my relatives had, because if I touch the blade, it's going to stop for me. So I don't get any kickbacks from Saw Stop, but this is an amazing saw, and it is worth every penny. My sweet wife made me buy this when it came out. She was the backbone to purchasing this saw, but now that I've actually touched the blade and felt what that is like and how it works, and I endorse this machine 100%. I've had about 6 kids touch it over the years, and nobody's had to go to the hospital. So, and I kind of get a little too close sometimes now. I think I've lost a little bit of respect for it because it works so good. So I have to always remind myself, and that's how I touch the blade, because I was just as late at night. I knew I was getting too close to the blade. I told myself, but you know, I hit it anyway, and it cost me some money, so I learned my lesson. So anyway, here we go. Gonna rip these off. Now I'm going to try to sand them flat so the faces are nice and smooth and parallel. All right, so this is probably the hardest part of this project, is drilling the holes for the rivets or the pegs to hold the wood pieces onto the metal. And I taped off the blade so I wouldn't get cut. I know this would be the part that I would, you know, most likely get cut on. And I didn't leave a lot of extra around this piece. So when I programmed this on the CNC machine, I mean, I only left like between a 32nd and a 16th all the way around to cut down the work on sanding it up to the blade and making this project a little easier. And luck be have it, my first run of that turned out I didn't have to do too many drafts of you know, altering the program, which was great. So I just centered this piece of metal in this wood, and I drilled the first hole, and then I put a peg in so that way these all stay lined up nice. And then I can come in here. The drill bit is an odd size. It's I don't remember what the actual drill bit is. I think it's 13/64 in diameter. So now I'm going to drill this second hole, and I'm going to line this up the best I can here. I have to move this down just a little bit. And I have a piece of wood underneath it because I know it's going to tear out. And I'm just going to line this up the way I want it to go. I don't think I probably have to clamp it in this case. And yeah, you know, that looks pretty good. So, drill this down. I am hitting the metal just a tiny bit. Okay. Move that out. I think I'm probably through. Got a nice speed on the drill press, and then so now this one lines up as well. So a couple of these, the way I had it programmed, there was just a little bit of tear out. So if your blank has a little tear out on that corner, just make sure that that corner right there that has a little chip in it is on the outside, and then, you know, you can just sand that, and then it will just disappear when you contour it. So shouldn't be too big a deal. All right, so now I'm going to drill some holes in these. All right, I went down to 0.08. All right, now I have to do the bottom one. So for the bottom one, I'm going to do the antler horns, I think. So I'm going to go back to my design import. I put a little pencil dot where I want the middle to be, so I can kind of see that pencil dot. That was another design I was going with, but I'm just going to try to cut these two out now. Might have a little crooked. I'm going to remove it. Try one more time. Scale it down. And just try to drop it in there. Okay, so there's what I came up with. I think it's gonna work. Might just be a tiny bit higher right there, but I think it's gonna work. Sometimes a little tricky getting these out, but I drilled some holes in the back. I'm just trying to gently pop them out. I used a little double-sided sticky tape to hold it in there. Alright, so I got these two out. So now to my next step on these, before I glue them to the knife handle, is to round that part there. Okay, to kind of round that, because once I get it on the knife handle, I won't be able to do this. So I'm going to round this piece and this piece. Alright, I'm lucky enough to have this spindle sander, so I'm going to round it on this. So now I have to sand these parts now, because once I glue those on, I'm not going to get away with that. I'm not going to be able to sand that as much. So I'm going to hand sand this part, blend this back a little bit, so then it looks just a little bit better. Okay, this is what that's looking like. I ended up knocking off this corner too, because now is my only chance to do that real easily. It's going to be a little harder to do that. And, you know, hopefully your metal lines up pretty good with your wood from the holes I drilled. I mean, it's still, there's some guesswork there. So now I just put this dowel in there, and I'm using this dovetail saw. And I'm just going to real gently try to cut my dowel off the length. You know, you could make the dowel a little bit too long, I think, and it wouldn't be a problem because it'll just crush into the vise, you know. So I put that one in there. I'm going to put this one in this side. Alright, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. So if the dowel is just a little long, it'd probably be better than being too short, right? So there we go. Got that dowel in. I'm going to need to get just maybe a little more tape on there. I'm going to tape it right up to that point. Okay, so I scratched this with some 150 grit sandpaper just to get the oils off and maybe to help the epoxy stick a little bit better. So I'm using a 2-part epoxy. It's just a 5-minute from Bob Smith Industries. So far, I'm really happy with this stuff. It works a lot better than the junk that's in the tube. So I'm going to put a little dab of that down. And then I'm going to do a little dab of the other stuff here. I don't remember which one's a hardener. Oh, the red one's a hardener. Okay, and then I'm going to stir it really good. And I always wear gloves with epoxy, man. I am so done with getting stuff on my hands. Like epoxy and stuff. Man, it's just, I'm just tired of it. Little smell, I might wear a respirator. I thought I picked a pretty clean board, but now I see I'm picking up some dust on this. So, you know, you might want to do a better job than me but I really want to make sure I stir it good. A lot of times people don't stir the epoxy good enough, I don't think. So I'm going to almost over stir this stuff if I can.
Alright, so now I'm going to spread it on the inside of this. Just do a nice thin layer. Make sure I coat every surface. I think I got a little too much, which is good because I need more for the other side. So then I'll come over this side. I'm trying to get a nice even coat over here. So I'll just get a nice layer all the way across. I think I did the perfect amount. Just a couple spots. I'm looking for no dry spots here. Alright, I can put my peg back in. I don't remember which peg went where. Oh, dang it. I think this is my front peg. Doesn't really matter, right? And I'm going to put this in here.
Back peg, I think I'll set this on first. I'm going to put my back peg in. All right, so now I'm going to come over here, and I got my vise prepped out, so I have some saran wrap on my vise. I'm looking this over. I want to make sure my blue tape isn't underneath the parts, obviously. And man, I'm pretty happy with this so far. My metal, it's not quite lined up my holes, but otherwise it's pretty good. So I'm gonna clamp this guy down. Look at it. If I have any extra epoxy pouring out, now's the time to wipe a little off. Kind of feel like I had the perfect amount. I like to just flip it over once after I do that initial squeeze, and just to see if it still looks pretty good. Well, I think they're probably pretty good. So I'm just gonna leave it overnight now. I know it's a 5-minute epoxy, but I'm not in a hurry, so I'll come back later. All right, now I'm beginning to shape this knife handle, and I left one face square there so you can kind of see what I'm doing. I'm just really trying to round it in every way that I can and just really knock off a lot of the corners, make it a lot more comfortable to use. So hopefully you can see by some of these angles I'm holding at that I've just made a lot of contours. You can do all this with hand sandpaper and a file, like a really nice wood file would be fine, or I mean you can even just wrap some sandpaper around a dowel. There's all kinds of ways to do this, but I do have a spindle sander, so I just kind of held it like this at some of these different angles and tried cleaning some of this up, and then I took it over to the edge sander and I did a little more on this, just trying to clean some of this up. I went across here, just trying to angle that up a little bit. And I am sanding a little bit of the metal, so you want to be careful, with your sparks with that. So I turned off my dust collector when I was doing that. And then the next thing I did was I just used my orbit sander for this, and I just held the knife blade and just did some orbit sanding, trying to contour it. So now I have a bunch of hand sanding to go on this. You can kind of see there's a little bump out there I need to take care of. Remember, I already had done this part before I even put it together, but I have to do a little bit more of this. So now the wood and the metal are all together. They're really nice and even. And just trying to give you some angles. I haven't done this side at all to try to show you what that looks like. All right, I just put my coat of finish on after I sanded and sanded and sanded. So I worked my sanding up to about 400 grit, and where the epoxy was, I probably went a little closer to 1,000 grit. Just trying to hit every spot the best I can. And you see, this one's really hard to see the depth in the epoxy because of the wood being so dark. So I'm going to flip this over. So here we have it on the other side. Now you can start to really see the depth in the epoxy. And basically I used a Danish oil, and mainly I did that because my shop is pretty cold right now, a little too cold for polyurethane. So that's why I chose that. I'll probably put some polyurethane over it once it warms up a little bit, but I'm going to put 2 coats of that on. So there you go. There's the knife build. I'll take the tape off, clean up the blade a little bit, and this thing will be ready to use. And hope you enjoyed the video. Good luck.